My name is Catherine Graham, and I'm the chair of the Provincial Mandate Working Group. On behalf of the working group, I'd like to welcome you to this town hall to discuss our work and to discuss the direction that we want to propose for the university to the provincial government going forward. More on the reason for this in a minute. But let me begin by introducing my colleagues on the Mandate Working Group, and I think they'll be familiar faces and names to almost everybody in this room. To my immediate left is John Shepherd, a Dean of Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs. Next to him is Ian Calvert, Assistant Vice President, Institutional Research and Planning. Rafiq Gubran, Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and Design, and Mark Forbes, who's Associate Vice President, Research. And the five of us were established as a sort of task force, named the Provincial Mandate Working Group in the late fall to carry forward the initiative to respond to the requirement that we negotiate a new agreement as a university with the provincial government. And so what we are doing is consulting in various fora to get an indication from the Carleton community what we should put forward as our best, our best foot. What would be our best foot to put forward in terms of discussing how we see ourselves in the future contributing to the post-secondary regime in the province. So the format of today is to give you a little bit more background about why this work is being done. And Ian Calvert is going to do that in a minute. And then I'm going to continue with a brief presentation of what we've heard so far. So as I said, we were created in the late fall, and what we've been doing since then is trying to gather facts and figures about how the university is positioned in terms of its own initiatives and in relation to other universities. We've tried to gather some field intelligence about what's happening within the provincial government. And we've been having some consultations around the university about the question of what we should propose in the context of the mandate agreement with the provincial government. So I'm going to talk about what we've heard so far with a view of spurring commentary from you about what you think we should put forward. So this is not a discussion about what the Mandate Working Group thinks. This is us relating to you what we've heard so far and asking you what you think we should put forward. So without further delay, over to Ian.
Thank you, Catherine, and welcome everyone. The province is very dependent on the universities in Ontario for a variety of things, as you know, for teaching, for research, for community service. But we in turn are very, very dependent on the government. We get about $150 million of operating funding annually. The government approves programs, and it's the students who are in those approved programs that are eligible for the funding. The government has provided capital funding to us just in the last few years. The province has contributed $26 million towards the river and canal buildings, along with another 26 from the federal government. And last June we heard that they were going to contribute $16 million to the library renovation and expansion. So it's very important that we have and we maintain a common purpose with the Ontario government. So when they talk about coming up with a new agreement with us, it's very important for us to try to understand just where they're coming from. So the next couple of slides is just a chronology of some things that have happened in the past few years from a provincial government perspective. Following the publication of the Ray Review and Report in 2005, the government made a major investment in post-secondary education in terms of the colleges, the universities, and financial aid. An investment amounting to $6.2 billion in additional funding over 5 years. And their three goals, as they articulated them, were access, quality, and accountability. Much more recently, if we go to the budget of almost 2 years ago, the budget of March 2010, this was the Reaching Higher plan was coming to an end, and they wanted to articulate a new direction. And so they talked about their Open Ontario plan and their goal of having 70% of the population with a post-secondary designation. So I should point out there are some acronyms in here. So I guess it's inevitable. So HECO is the Higher Education Quality Council of Ontario. That's something the province set up to advise them in 2005. And so the Deputy Minister asked them to look at differentiation, whether a more strongly differentiated set of universities would help improve the overall performance and sustainability of the system and help Ontario compete internationally. So HECO is a player on the provincial scene as well, and their report a few years later said that they believed that a more differentiated post-secondary sector offers considerable advantages to both students and the public. And so this is a theme that's underlying some of the subsequent communications from the government. The budget that came out almost a year ago, in that the government committed to another 60,000 spaces for post-secondary education, about 20,000 on the college side and 40,000 on the university side, including 6,000 more graduate spaces. As you may be aware, with graduate funding several years ago, they decided to allocate targets to institutions. And so it's very important to us that given our ambitions with respect to new and expanded graduate programs, that we get our fair share of those spaces. Last May, the then Minister of Training Colleges and Universities gave a speech, John Malloy, called Putting Students First, and I have a slide a little later on that. And the next day, a memo came out from the Deputy Minister of the Ministry that articulated more the ideas that were in that speech. As you know, we had an election in October, and leading up to that, there were some campaign promises that the government is now working on fulfilling. The HECO was again weighing in on the current status of the universities and expressing concern about the quality of instruction in particular in Ontario's universities. And just more recently, we've had some additional communication from the government, although at this stage it's still very, very general. You'll see that I'm using quotes in several of these slides. What I'm trying to do is show you the actual language the government is using, because we're still waiting for them to be more specific about what some of these things might mean. But you'll see again the attainment rate of 70%. They want space available for every qualified student, and they're anticipating growth. The demographics are certainly dipping in the province, but because we're seeing increasing participation rates, enrollments, for example, the high school applications as of the deadline last week were up another 2%, and they're anticipating slow growth over the next several years, but then increased growth thereafter. Increasing quality and modernizing delivery, and themes that had come out before in terms of credit transfer, online learning, increased international enrollment. In the budget, they said that Ontario has long recognized the importance of a well-educated workforce that can compete in the global economy and attract international investment. And so this preoccupation with the economy comes through in much of what they've been saying to us. So I referred to the speech from the minister, and as far as we can tell, the new minister is carrying on with the same themes. The basic goal being, I want my kids to go on in school and get a good job. We've heard that a few times. Quality is at the heart of his Putting Students First program. The notion of measurement, measuring the essential elements of teaching excellence and seeing it improved across the board. And so this is where he announced that they wanted to, just looking at the fourth bullet there, we want to negotiate these individual mandate and enrollment agreements, and focusing on our resources on what each institution does best. and establishing baselines and targets that will tie future funding to their achievement. Right now, there's a very limited amount of performance funding. It's less than 1% of what they're providing to us. So the next day, as I said, the Deputy Minister came out with a memo to the presidents of all of the institutions and talked about their new plan, connecting the strengths and aspirations of the institutions with the priorities of students, the economy and the province. And then referring to these mandate agreements that they want to negotiate with us. You can see continuing to offer a full range of core programming, particularly at the undergraduate level, while identifying areas of excellence and specialization. So that's one of the challenges that we have. How do we articulate our areas of excellence and specialization? And we have been reporting to them on our progress on various fronts in terms of the original access, quality, and accountability, but they're emphasizing this notion of reporting, focusing on measuring success. Now, I mentioned in the chronology that the head of the Higher Education Quality Council had expressed concern about the quality of Ontario's universities. And you can see on this slide some of the things that they're concerned about: large classes, more use of contract instructors. NESE, there's another acronym. Some of you may not know, that's the National Survey of Student Engagement. About 750 North American universities participated in that this year. We did very well, by the way. The results are available on the OARP website. Our students are more satisfied than the average Ontario University student. We've seen significant progress. And that's certainly something that we would want to communicate forcefully to the provincial government. The election campaign, the Liberals, in addition to promising the tuition grant that they're now implementing, they also talked about 3 new undergraduate campuses. And the GTA is the second largest source of students for us. They talked about, in the election campaign, putting them all in the GTA. But now the new minister is he's speaking to the Canadian University Press or the Maclean's. He's being more, he's not being as committal about where such new institutions might be, but we have been benefiting from undergraduate growth, and we get over 80% of our students from Ontario, so obviously we need to know what's going to happen on that front. In early December, I attended a meeting where one of the assistant deputy ministers articulated, again, this putting students first plan. And they're really using pretty much the same language. We haven't had anything more specific from them since the May communications from the minister and from the deputy minister. There is a working group that the Council of Ontario Universities and the ministry is just set up to try to articulate more what might be in these agreements. So I think that at that, I'll hand it over to Catherine to talk to you a little bit more about what we've heard so far. Thank you.
I do want to emphasize that what you are about to hear is the working group's best efforts to distill the messages we've heard so far. And our goal is to keep building them and, in a sense, refining them going forward. So the first message that we have heard is that we need to focus on 2 basic things. The first is that we should build on our foundations, and many of you will have been part of discussions that really have focused on some of the unique characteristics of Carleton and some of the particular advantages that we have, such as our location in the capital, such as the extent of our community engagement and partnerships, such as our focus on accessibility for students and individuals who have otherwise difficulty in attending a post-secondary institution, and a focus on performance, which has been an emphasis that we've had at Carleton in recent years. all of these build on some of the aspirations and initiatives that have been undertaken as a result of the university's strategic plan, Defining Dreams, and the Carleton Academic Plan that was adopted by Senate in June of 2010. So these are not new, but the sense is that we should really build on our foundations. And the second foundation is that of putting students first and building a sustainable university. So Ian alluded to the fact that we are doing well and improving in terms of the National Survey on Student Engagement. We also have an increased emphasis in the graduate student experience at Carleton, which is something that we need to amplify and build on, is the view that's been expressed so far. Just dwelling a little bit more in terms of our focus on performance, since the province will be interested in this as we negotiate the mandate agreement, these are some of the areas in which we have been particularly active in recent times. So in terms of program quality, for example, we have a new quality assurance regime, which is quite robust. In terms of the student experience and success, if you looked at the university splash page yesterday, you will have seen the announcement about Bounce Back. Well, we're very active and we're constantly thinking about new things to assist our students and have them have the best and most successful experience at Carleton as possible. In terms of a healthy workplace, you'll see the tunnel walkers and so on. And in terms of accountability, we place a great deal of emphasis on accountability within the university, with the community, through our board and through other community engagements, and as Ian was saying, to the provincial government. So what should we think about building on these strengths going forward? What should be our ambitions? Well, what we've heard so far is that Carleton should indicate its willingness to grow in response to student and social demand in areas of strategic importance to Ontario. So what do we mean by that? Well, again, we are attentive to the aspirations that students and their families express through various media to have an education that equips them for active citizenship and for a place as a productive individual in the labor market. We have other kinds of social demands that are out there that we need to respond to as a major post-secondary institution. That includes the demand to have citizens who are actively engaged in the voluntary sector and in other aspects of society, as well as in the economy. So that this should be something that we emphasize. The second area of emphasis that we've heard pretty consistently is that we should highlight our capital advantage. And this has a number of dimensions. It has a local dimension, a national dimension, and an international dimension. But the capital advantage is something which is crucial for us. It's reflected in our current program mix, in our current strategic emphasis. And it's reflective in terms of the role that we currently play in Eastern Ontario as a driver of prosperity and sustainability. And so there's an appetite that we've gleaned so far in our consultations to build on this, to position Carleton as a real engine of opportunity and development for a prosperous and sustainable Eastern Ontario, and to lever our national location as part of that role. And I want to emphasize that this is not a parochial vision. This is something which builds on our local talents, our local role, but also propels us into the national and international domains. So how do we realize these ambitions? Well, again, we've heard a number of things so far in our consultations about really what we look like now and where we might go to realize our ambitions related to growth and responsiveness and related to our role internationally, nationally, and as a driver of sustainability in Eastern Ontario. The first is the size and characteristics of our student body. And we want to emphasize our existence as an institution with a strong undergraduate and graduate component. But one of the things that we have heard is that to the extent that we are able, as a result of the allocation of some of these new graduate spaces by the provincial government, we should seek to expand our graduate enrollment as a proportion of our enrollment. In terms of recruitment priorities, our traditional base has been Eastern Ontario, but we're seeing more emphasis, and there's an appetite expressed to continue to emphasize enhanced recruitment in other parts of Canada, particularly in the Greater Toronto Area, internationally, and among Aboriginal and first-generation students. In terms of the characteristics of our programs, there seems to be quite a clear distinction in terms of the roles of our undergraduate, master's, and PhD programs in the university. At the undergraduate level, we're hearing some agreement that the focus of undergraduate programs at Carleton should be primarily to give students a foundation in a discipline or area of specialization. At the master's level, we are truly innovative in terms of mounting interdisciplinary programs, which in some cases bring faculties together to deal with the major problems that face our society, our economy, and our environment. And we have a number of innovative interdisciplinary master's programs that really earmark Carleton. And then at the PhD level, we have a reputation which we want to sustain and build for educating highly qualified people who, upon completion of their doctorates, can take their place in the academy or in other parts of society, bringing their knowledge and skills to bear. One of the things that has characterized Carleton in recent times have been new approaches to curriculum and delivery. We're seeing an increase in partnership engagement in student learning at the undergraduate and the graduate level. We're seeing a new emphasis in terms of relating the activities of students at the doctoral level to students at the undergraduate level, and so on. And there's an appetite to build on these and to think about new ways of delivering curriculum, not only new modes of teaching, and that's very important, but also new ways potentially of structuring our curriculum. So some of you may have heard the phrase stackable curriculum. This is the idea that in some cases we might find it valuable to have, in a sense, chewable chunks in the form of certificates and diplomas that could then be stacked together should someone pursuing a certificate or diploma to count toward a degree at the undergraduate or the graduate level. And finally, in terms of realizing our ambitions, we want to really express our strong vision of ourselves as a research university, doing fundamental and applied research with identifiable research clusters and with a strong track record and a strong emphasis going forward on research partnerships with other universities, with the private sector, with the not-for-profit sector, and with the public sector. We are seeking, as we've heard so far, to integrate research and teaching, and this, it's suggested, should be one of our aspirations to build on what we are doing going forward. And finally, we need to emphasize to the provincial government that our approach to student support has been extremely innovative, continues to be, and will continue to be going forward. So, keeping with the theme of building on existing strengths to innovate, we do want to build on our comparative advantage We do want to build on interdisciplinary innovation, particularly in terms of our master's level programming, but to incorporate interdisciplinarity through our research and student engagement in research and other activities throughout our curriculum and our academic endeavors. We also want to build on existing strengths to innovate in terms of our partnership strategy within the post-secondary sector. And there has been a fair amount of discussion of this in the consultations we've held so far. And by this we mean to continue to collaborate actively with the University of Ottawa in our joint institutes for graduate programs, and to potentially expand and sharpen our engagement with community colleges, where we have collaborative programs such as the Bachelor of Information Technology program, and where we need to work with our community college colleagues to really have greater meshing of college offerings with offerings at Carleton, so that students coming from community colleges are well equipped to undertake work at the university level should they desire to do so. So in terms of outputs, what do people see as the Carleton of the future? It's not all that different in terms of what we would probably describe ourselves today. And that is as a dynamic university that focuses on teaching, research, and engagement for social need. But we also think that it's possible, and these are some of the attributes of our graduates, that we can express to the provincial government, and we'd be interested in your comments on these. I just want to particularly emphasize the kind of academic experience that students have at Carleton. And there's been considerable emphasis in the discussions that we've had so far around the role of our academic programs in equipping graduates to be productive and socially responsive individuals, with the idea that in addition to subject knowledge, that there is a requirement that we incorporate into our curriculum transferable skills such as communication, ability to understand the flow and the development of knowledge, and other kinds of transferable life skills that will equip our graduates going forward. So that's what we've heard so far. It's a fair amount for you to absorb in a brief period of time. But again, the purpose of today is to ask you to reflect on that and to provide us with commentary from your perspective on what we should put forward as the Carleton of today and tomorrow to the provincial government, and indeed to others. And so we've just developed some questions that perhaps would guide the discussion going forward. So Ian indicated in his opening remarks that the province's emphasis in terms of its policy is on the economy, putting students first in the post-secondary system and the sustainability of the post-secondary system. So, again, just to repeat, what should we emphasize to align Carleton's aspirations? Are there strengths that so far the working group hasn't heard? I tried to identify for you on behalf of the working group what we have heard so far. Are there things that we have missed? And then the final question is, what should we do? We've heard the question or the comment in other fora that some of the ways that we describe ourselves and some of the aspirations that we have going forward are relatively generic. That's a fair comment. The proof of what we aspire to be will be what we actually do. And so are there specific initiatives that people think we should entertain going forward to try and realize our vision, whatever that may be? So I'm going to open the floor for questions and hopefully lots of commentary and discussion going forward. I happen to be the chair of the Mandate Working Group, but I'm not the only voice of the Mandate Working Group, so my colleagues will respond as they wish to do.
My name is Nick Falvo. I'm Vice President of Finance of Carleton's Graduate Students Association. I'm also a PhD candidate in public policy at Carleton. A short while ago, I read this 2009 book called Academic Transformation. It was funded by the Higher Education Quality Council of Ontario, written by Ian Clark, among other authors. A lot of you are familiar with this. My understanding is that it outlines some of the ideas that the Ontario government is looking at moving towards. I want to raise some concerns I have about the book, and then I want to raise just a point about what might be missing from Carleton's strategy. Early on in the book, the authors talk about the current post-secondary education model in Ontario, and they argue that it's financially unsupportable. Those are their words. They don't really say why. They point out that enrollment's rising substantially and that funding per student's gone down, but they don't really get into why the current model couldn't continue as is. It's sort of left to read between the lines. And I think it's unfortunate that they didn't spend more time talking about that. I think it's especially unfortunate that they don't talk about what's happened to taxation rates at the provincial level or at the federal level in Canada. By the time the Harris-Eves governments got through their taxation cuts in 2003, Ontario's fiscal capacity had been reduced by about $18 billion a year. That's about 20% of provincial spending. I think that is what's financially unsustainable, not what universities are doing, not the fact that professors want to do research. It's what's happening more at a political economy level in Canada. Second point I want to make is the authors talk about a model they have in Germany, a model that exists in Germany. There's an institution there called Fachhochschulen. A Fachhochschulen is like a university, but it's not quite a university. And the authors hint, they don't really say very explicitly, but they hint that Ontario should look at adopting something like this. The teaching load of a full-time faculty member at a Fachhochschule is more than double that of a full-time faculty member at one of Germany's universities. Also, and this is important, the average faculty salary at a Fachhochschule is roughly 20% less than that at a German university. That seems to be the kind of approach that's being hinted at in this book and by the Ontario government. A couple of other points I'd like to make that were raised in the book. They suggest that more undergraduate students should do 3-year degrees instead of 4-year degrees. They also suggest that there should be new Ontario institutions where faculty would teach 6 to 8 courses per year rather than the current norm of 4. They argue that one of the advantages of making this happen in new institutions rather than at already existing institutions is that newly created institutions would be, quote, unencumbered by their history, institutional culture, and contractual relationships. So this seems to be largely an exercise where we accept taxation rates as being low and not being able to move up. That's taken as a given. And how can we realize cost savings in the post-secondary education? And it's hinted that professors should be paid less, that they should teach substantially more, and that students should take more 3-year degrees instead of 4-year degrees. And so what is missing from Carleton's strategy? I think what's missing, at least based on what I've heard this morning, is the political. And I think that I'd like to know more about how political the Council of Ontario Universities, your lobby group, is planning to be. And if they're not planning to be political, I think you should think about working more with the trade union sector. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nick. I can't speak on behalf of the Council of Ontario Universities, but people should be aware that the Council is following the provincial initiatives extremely carefully. The executive heads, meaning the presidents of all the universities in Ontario, including our own, are very actively engaged, as are the provosts of Ontario universities, in following the policy path of the provincial government. The Council of Ontario Universities has been successful in getting the government to agree to a joint working group to actually define what these mandate agreements will look like, which is a positive development. So there is a committee, I believe it's 3 executive heads and senior representatives of the ministry who will be working together to define these these mandate agreements. You know, if you are able to have a voice in setting the template, you're able to have at least some influence in shaping the discussion. So something that didn't come out in the initial context is that post the election, as Ian said, things have, you know, we have a new minister, the pace has sort of altered, but we, at this point, do not know what these mandate working agreements will be looking like, what will be contained in them. We don't know exactly when the period of negotiation with individual institutions will begin or when these things will be concluded. But I think it's reasonably good news that the Council of Ontario Universities has been able to persuade the government of Ontario to work with it in shaping the agreements themselves. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to add anything. Ian, do you have anything to add?
That's fine.
Yes.
Hi, James Meads, co-president QP 4600, teaching assistants and contract instructors here at Carleton. I sort of have 3 somewhat interrelated points to bring up. I had recently heard a radio ad for Carleton promoting the slogans of anything but textbook and putting students first. Now, from Nick's response, we can see that the university is behaving somewhat textbook. So maybe we should sort of look into that. And I say this very particularly because there was one little point in the slide that I really wish the university had recognized about 2 years ago. And that was increasing class sizes and the increasing reliance on contract instructors. Now, I took part in the bargaining process for both groups last fall. And both of those issues were on the table from our side. And both of those issues were refused to be heard by the university. Class size restrictions, especially for tutorial groups and laboratories, was deemed completely unacceptable solution to increasing enrollments, and that it was impossible for the university to put such restrictions on it. And then a remark by somebody actually sitting up there that I'll let them get off the hook without being named publicly, but that contract instructors don't have real jobs. It's not a real job. It's something they temporarily do before they go out to get a real job, maybe as a tenured faculty position. But as we've seen, that's really on the decrease. Now, my recommendations to you, and I think they touch on Nick's comments earlier, is that if the university is really serious about engaging in consultation with the community, you know, a half-hour discussion is probably not quite sufficient. That maybe diversifying the mandate working group to include some union faculty student representation would probably be a really good start at a genuine attempt at a consultation. And if we are really serious about improving our access and our quality, then I would say, you know, the consistent 4.5%, 5%, 6%, 7%, 8% tuition increases that we expect to see every March, maybe, you know, get put off for a year. I mean, Carleton was the first university in the province where tuition had outstripped provincial funding. That happened last year. It was about 51% tuition, 47% provincial funding. That is now even higher this year. We're at about 55% student tuition for our operating budget. So it's issues like this where, you know, people like me get maybe a little bit skeptical about processes like this. And I really hope that this is a genuine attempt. And I really hope that, when the March Board of Governors meeting convenes, that the issue of a tuition increase is not on the table, is not on the agenda. And I hope that when the 2 groups from QB 4600 return to the table, we see both a genuine attempt to limit class sizes, to decrease workload for both TAs and contract instructors, and start supporting the people that make this university work. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I just want to focus on one part of your comment. People probably are not aware that this is not the first provincial mandate agreement that Carleton has negotiated. We began with the provincial government to take on obligations that reflected our aspirations around the time of the double cohort. And I say people may not be aware of that because at that time it was deemed to be an administrative matter to basically decide how many students we would take in and to negotiate with the province that we would do so. So this approach is a little different, in fact. We do have an expectation that we will be asked to assume some obligations by the provincial government, just as we were around the time of the original mandate agreement at the time of the double cohort. But this time, we're actually trying to put some meat on the bones, for lack of a better phrase, to the context within which Carleton will do that. So this is a different process. I indicated at the beginning that I would be summarizing at the end when people can interact with us again, and there will be other opportunities. And certainly anyone who wants to make any kind of a comment to the Mandate Working Group, we have a dedicated email address. It's amazingly called Mandate Working Group at carleton.ca. And so please, we are interested in keeping up the dialogue with you.
There seems to be a gap in the conversation, so let me just reiterate a little bit what Catherine was saying, in that this is not a conflictual situation. We are all working together. We're all on the same page. We would like to see more funding for the university. We would like to see improvements in everything that we do. And the way to do that is for us to work together to put the best proposal possible. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be trying to influence political opinion. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't try other efforts as well. Those things, we have to work with our other universities, on the Council of Ontario University, with our neighboring institutions. We have to do all of those things, reach out to the public and make sure that they continue realizing that higher education is an investment for this province, that it's a good not just for the individuals who have the privilege of going to the university, but it's good for the community. It's good for the economic development of the province. It's good for the future of humanity, because the cures for the ills that beset the world, whether they be in terms of disease or in terms of philosophy and thought, can only be cured through education and thinking. So we need to support our universities, and I really think it's great that we are actually all sitting here thinking about what we are doing and could do. And I'd love to hear from somebody who would like to think about some things that we aren't doing yet, that we might be able to propose in the future. We know that some of the other schools are going to propose creating new campuses or creating new faculties or new programs and ideas. We'd love to hear from you. What things could we do in the future? Not just holding on to what we have, but let's think about taking on other opportunities, because these are interesting times. They're the opportunity to get additional funds for new projects. So let's think creatively.
I'm John Ap Simon. I was one of the people who made my bleat before the working group, and there's you must have heard an awful lot of commonalities, as I see from. Oh, sorry. Am I now on? I'm not in the camera, so you don't get glare from the back of my head. So you're okay. So this sort of thing happens from time to time, and we've lived through these. We always come back and say, well, let's go with our strengths. That's your biggest challenge. That's our biggest challenge, because everybody represented here, right, thinks that their own unit, their own interest, their own discipline is one of our strengths. So some tough choices have to be made. Have you given any preliminary thought to what that challenge will present?
while we're still in the listening mode, I think it's reasonable to say that the attention of the working group is focusing in on those first two sort of aspirational statements that I put out. And we are starting to think a little bit more specifically about how we might realize an expanded role as really an engine of prosperity for Eastern Ontario. We haven't got to any specifics yet, and frankly, it's possibly within the capability of the working group to come up with some ideas, but it's not in the total realm of the working group to come up with ideas. We need to hear ideas from the community. So the proof of the pudding, as I said at the conclusion of my remarks, was, you know, the way we will really prove what we are and where we're going is by what we actually do. And you know, we are very serious in thinking that some of the initiatives that happen in individual units at the faculty level are crucial in terms of defining and refining what we do and how we realize that vision. So we're not at that stage yet. It would be great if we could get to the stage of having some specific priorities going forward. My view is that would be excellent, but we're not at that stage yet. The other thing I would say is that you know, we are not mandated to go around sort of cherry picking programs or initiatives. That's not our job. So our emphasis is on going forward and what else, you know, what can we do going forward. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to respond to John or not.
Well, from a research perspective, we've been spending a lot of time in the Office of Vice President of Research looking at our strengths, looking at where we are actually getting, in terms of defining dreams, where we have sort of clusters of research excellence and so on and so forth. We're spending a fair bit of time thinking about partnerships, not as one-off things, but where do we have sustainable partnerships? And certainly that's been something that's been done in engineering a fair bit, and also in other faculties with respect to some of the government organizations. So we're spending a fair bit of time looking at where we can build capacity. And that building of capacity is important because we have, typically we're around 70 million of funds. We want to build beyond that, but one thing that you should recognize is that if 70 million is 20 to 25% of the operating budget of the university, that if we build up that, it actually has trickle-down effects in terms of undergraduate education and things like that. I know over the past 15 years that I've been here, most of my students that are undergraduate students that have had funded research in my lab, and I'm sure that's the same for many faculty here, have been funded by federal programs in the pursuit of research excellence. So it's critical that we identify where we want to go. And we have lots and lots. One of the things I've seen in the last 2 years here in this post is lots and lots now of research excellence that's perhaps not been communicated as much to the province. And you might have saw last week, VP Matheson was interviewed by the Ottawa Citizen talking just about how much our money comes from the federal government versus the provincial government. The provincial is quite a bit less, but it's nonetheless important. So I think that pursuit of research excellence and the clusters has that effect of actually helping us with our undergraduate education along the lines of some of the pillars of creative and critical inquiry that have been proposed.
Hi, Justin Paulson, Sociology Department. I don't think cherry picking specific programs and trying to leave others behind is necessarily the best way to go, nor something that any of us in this room see as the point of this committee. I'm sure everyone who's faculty or a graduate student in their department understands the strengths of their program in ways that perhaps others don't. But I think Carleton itself already has areas that make it stand out in differentiated ways from all the other Ontario universities across Canada. regardless of whether or not there are partnerships in the business community, we have a number of programs that have national and international reputations for excellence. The important point here, I think, is to make sure we don't ignore these as we move forward with understanding how we're differentiating ourselves from other universities. Is it possible to go back one slide? I have a question about, one forward there.
There we are.
In this list of what we're seeking in graduate output, academic knowledge, transferable skills, entrepreneurial spirit, capacity for innovation, et cetera, what I see there is a list that I wouldn't expect to be any different from any of the other universities or any of the colleges in Ontario. And I know you've talked a bit about increasing our partnerships with the community colleges, but I'm wondering how the committee understands the role of Carleton as different from the community colleges. Not just another year, not just a different building, different environment, but there's a historic mandate of the university, which I think we've adopted in Canada and North America in generally, that graduates need to be able to think critically about the world that they live in, not just simply adopt received wisdom and go out and start a business with it. Also, the universities, as opposed to the community colleges, are known historically for teaching people how to write and think through writing. This is something that we have strengths in, but perhaps not enough emphasis on at Carleton. These are just a couple of ideas, but I'm wondering, as a question, if you can talk about how you see the mandate of Carleton separate from the community colleges that we're working with.
I'd like to go back to something that Catherine has said, and I think it's very important. I think our distinctiveness is not simply that we are doing these things or want to do these things. I think our distinctiveness is going to be in how we do them, in how we actually execute them. And I think linked to that, some of the field intelligence that we've received about how the ministry might react to proposals the universities put forward is that they're going to be convinced by evidence-based cases. So we can actually demonstrate that we're already very strong in these areas in a quite sort of factual way. I think in terms of our relationships to the community colleges, the college system in Ontario is actually quite different, or the relationship between the colleges and the universities in Ontario is quite different to the relationship, let's say, in a province such as British Columbia, where there's seems to be a well-established and pretty successful way of students beginning to do 2 years in a community college and then moving on to a university. I actually have a granddaughter who's just started in a college and then will be going to UVic because she wants to become a school teacher and will get a B.Ed. I think where we can perhaps be innovative is in beginning discussions with the community colleges, some community colleges in our area, about how we might strengthen the relationships between the community colleges and Carleton, and perhaps begin to develop ways in which students in community colleges can go through an education that really does prepare them to transfer to universities. I think we know that the challenge we've had with 1 or 2 programs here, where we take students from community colleges, is that the type of education there at the moment is perhaps somewhat different to the education in a university, and there can be challenges in sort of in the transfer itself. So I think that's something that we might want to look at.
Rafiq?
Yeah. And another important differentiator, of course, is research. And that's research done by graduate students and also research at the undergraduate level. So that's a big differentiator between what we do and what colleges do.
So I see we have a number of people at the microphones, which is great. What I propose is that those who have stood to make comments, certainly you'll have an opportunity, but I'm mindful of the time, and so after that I propose that we have a quick wrap-up. So, Stuart?
Thank you, Catherine. Stuart Ryan. I work for QP 4600. At a previous consultation this body had with the unions, there's a part of your mandate was to feel out what you hear at Queen's Park. And I see a lot of emphasis on all the buzzwords here, sustainable, sustainable. I assume that means financial. And there's another body going on called the Drummond Commission, which is to advise the provincial government on how to deal with its budget deficit. And though it does say health and education are to be exempt, they just announced $60 million cuts to sort of health research. So I have a feeling that these things are in the wind. So have you got any sense? My feeling is the Drummond Commission will say you have to work on post-secondary education and be more efficient and entrepreneurial and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering what your comments are on those changes that we've seen already and what may be coming.
Well, my personal view is, and we haven't talked to Don Drummond, but my personal view is that the province has already signaled what it has in mind in terms of the post-secondary system through some of the statements that Ian highlighted at the beginning of this morning's session. So they are looking for cost effectiveness. They're looking for particularly some increased emphasis on distance learning. Perhaps they're looking for increased correspondence between universities and community colleges. Those are the things they're looking at. I'm sure that the Drummond report will comment on the post-secondary sector, but there's more than enough commentary extant right now about the shape of the post-secondary sector in Ontario to fuel lots of thinking inside of the government. I don't know if anyone else on the working group has read different tea leaves than I have, but that's what I'm looking at my empty cup. Stan?
Thank you. Just one more thing, President Runty's idea of new ideas. We have a large labor movement in this city, national offices, Canadian Labor Congress, QP, and stuff. We have this new master's degree to train political people on the Hill. We could probably try to build on that strength as well as, high tech and stuff like that.
Great, thank you. Stan?
Stan Weiner. I'm from Public Policy and Economics. One of the substantial developments over the last 2 decades, from my perspective, has been the emergence of Carleton as a better research institution than it used to be. It was originally focused mostly on undergraduate teaching. In fact, I was an undergraduate here and experienced that. I think it's declined in quality in that respect since the early days. The research has certainly improved. The research has certainly improved. And that brings me to my question, which is to ask you if you could expand on what you think putting students first means. That phrase seems to have come up several times in the documents that you presented, and what the implications of this might be for the continuing improvement of the research establishment at Carleton.
Well, certainly I agree with your point about the increasing intensity of research at the university since you and I both began here. In terms of putting students first, I think part of that is intended to suggest that research is important, but the engagement of students in research is important. And it's important in the context of their classroom experience, having faculty members who are themselves active researchers engage with students about their own research. and also engaging students in research, not only at the PhD level, but at other levels as well. And we've begun, and Mark will amplify this, but we've begun serious initiatives around the undergraduate research experience. We know from some of our recruitment efforts that we're already getting high school students who are coming to recruitment events who are starting to think of themselves as graduate students. So we need to put that idea of engaging students in research as part of their Carleton experience very close to the forefront. Mark, do you want to?
Yeah, just we're also continuing to partnering with Partners in Research, and their virtual researcher on call, which is going back out to high school students and being sort of frontline researchers at the university, giving interviews to, or being interviewed by high school students. So I just want to return, though, to this idea that in the pursuit of research excellence, that does bring in the money to the research endeavor, and a lot of that money does find its way to undergraduate researchers. We certainly, as the undergraduate enrollment were to increase and continue to increase, we'd be met with challenges about how many of our students actually have experiences in those areas: undergraduate research, internationalization or international experience versus community engaged pedagogy, and so on and so forth.
The problem is that there's a budget constraint, and I mean, of course you're aware of this, and it's a very difficult problem to know how to deal with this tension between improving teaching and improving research. I don't have any magic answers to suggest in this respect, but that seems to me to be one of the fundamental challenges facing Carleton. If we want to increase the size of our graduate student body, which certainly is required to improve the research establishment, and to reduce teaching loads for researchers, which again is required to improve the teaching establishment, and to pay higher salaries so that we compete with the University of Toronto and Western and Queen's in getting the best young people, then we have a problem with class sizes and the number of contract instructors and so on. And it seems to me this is at the core of what the challenge is for Carleton, which is a good mid-level university aspiring to be a really, really good mid-level university. How do we manage this? Now, if the province is going to come in and insist that we put our money into undergraduate teaching, this is a problem, I think. I don't know how to deal with it, but because I don't know, I guess you don't know exactly what the province wants us to do. So that's
sort of
that's where I see us.
Some of the field intelligence we have found, though, is that the province may not go to this idea of two tiers of universities, research intensive and primarily undergraduate, that there is a third tier to which Carleton would fall clearly in. And that's the tier that has the greatest challenge, I would argue, is that this tier of doing both and doing both well is where the challenge lies. But that's certainly the sort of intelligence we're getting, is that there's going to be a third tier.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Phil Robinson. I work for the Graduate Students Association. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. I just sort of wanted to respond to the request for sort of some practical suggestions for Carleton moving forward. There's been a lot of talk about the demographic crisis, just with fewer and fewer younger people who will be coming up into university. And given, I mean, the provincial per student funding has been stagnant since the early 90s, mid-90s, so it's actually gone down with inflation. So universities have largely been trying to fund themselves by just getting more and more students in. And I was just wondering, on the opposite end of the demographic question, there's a large numbers of baby boomers retiring and who are going to be in retirement on average for probably 20, 30 years. And as was noted, we're in the capital. So we're with the proportion of retirees that are going to be in the capital region, there's going to be an overrepresentation of people with pensions and relatively decent pensions by general standards. And I know with that population, there's also going to be a real interest in keeping the mind active, right? I've taken some courses at Algonquin, say personal interest courses that are in the evening, or sometimes you can do them, I think you can still do them where they have like a week on a particular topic in the summer, where there's less stress on resources. And given that we have a lot of faculty who can talk about all kinds of different interesting contemporary issues across the faculties, I'm just wondering if Carleton's given any consideration to setting up programs that could be non-degree programs, right? That could be more personal interest programs addressing different issues, whether they're night course or week course in the summer or something like that, that would be particularly targeted to retirees who would just be interested in the experience and the engagement.
Right, well, we are aware of that market, and your suggestions are really good. We do already have something called the Learning and Retirement Initiative, which brings people in to have their minds tickled by discussions of art history to thermodynamics. But we have been thinking somewhat more about summer institutes of different kinds. This idea of stackable curriculum, which I mentioned in the presentation, fits into potentially the needs and interests of this demographic as well. So this is an area that we, I think, do want to explore. So thanks again for mentioning it.
And just last week, I had the pleasure of actually going to West End Learning Unlimited, which really hits this area quite a bit. There was over 150 baby boomers in the audience to give a talk. When I was giving a talk to this group, and this was just one small, it's an anecdotal, personal sort of experience, but it's one small group that's scattered around the city.
Yes, last question, comment.
Good morning. I think this is on, yes?
Yep.
So I just want to give sort of my 2 cents of my concerns of what I see are like contradictions in your presentation. I am a second-year master's candidate in the Institute of Political Economy, which is one of those interdisciplinary programs that I'm sure you've heard of and that I would say has both national and international sort of attention being thrown at it right now. But it works, and we have great researchers and we have great student investigators that go on to do PhD programs at the university, at Carleton University, with the opportunity of taking a specialization for your PhD in our sister programs that we work with. So we work with social sciences, and we work in sociology, anthropology, geography, economics, public policy, and those programs allow the students to have a very sort of flexible catering of a master's degree and then later on to go on to your PhD and cater your research in a way that may not be particularly sociological or may not be particularly economics oriented, let's say. This program in my mind works, and it works very well because we still have maintained a very small body of students. So for example, my cohort is 12 students. We are able to think critically and provide good critical research because our class sizes are very small, and so we have very excellent professors who enable us the spaces to be able to discuss not only as professor or student, but as colleagues, right? And I feel that we develop very innovative, if you want to use your words, research projects that do get very high attention rates from national and provincial research funding. So that's the quantitative aspect if you want to look at what actually gets paid back, right? Which is that we are very heavily funded, and there's quite a few of us who hold SSHRC grants, for example, and quite a few of our graduates that move on and get PhD SSHRCs, okay? My problem is that this is a purely actually qualitative sort of experience, right? I mean, the provincial government is not going to say that that's a sustainable program for 12 students to be in the program. And I feel that those are sort of at odds with each other because the teaching aspect is necessarily and integrally linked to the research aspect, right? I'm sure that there's a few genius graduate students that come in and have an idea and are able to cultivate that idea in a very strong research setting. But I think that for the majority of us, we come to be those researchers because of the classes that we take, because of the professors that we work with. And so if class sizes are going up and professors are being forced to teach more and research less or research more, those things all affect our quality of the learning experience, right? And then affect our ability to research. And just as a side note, because I guess my comments are sort of a particular case of James's comments, which is that also as a student, in order to do good research, or in order to work in a research placement, for example, these alternatives that Carleton is giving, which I think are very excellent, it also requires that you have a stable income, right, so that you can do these things. And so when funding is going up and we have to pay tuition rates that are going up, it's very difficult to be able to balance all these things. And so I think that I would recommend that, or I guess my question would be, how are you going to defend these small programs that are innovative, sustainable, high research programs in the event that the government says, well, we want you to have those good programs because we see that they're great for Carleton, but we also need to see the quantitative numbers. And we need to see the money coming in. And I want to know what your priority will be at the end of the day when that decision, which I think we all know is coming from the provincial government, actually happens. How will those small institutes, those small programs that are front runners, actually end up being protected? Or will they be protected when you have to choose one or the other? Because I really don't see the two of them being viable options together, right? If Carleton is going to come out, this model to me seems that it's conflicting and that we want two different visions, and I think that one needs to be defended if we're going to go forward with these sort of front-running things.
So John Shepard, as Dean of Graduate and Postdoctoral Affairs, may want to respond, but I'll just start by saying that I think it's important at any university to look at the institution as an institution, not to look at it as a series of individual programs that are money makers or not. That as an intellectual community, we make decisions about what we're going to do in terms of our program offerings, on the understanding that as an institution, we have to be financially viable and sustainable, but that there are some things which we invest in which reap returns in terms of high-quality graduates, in terms of graduates who are making major contributions to the field or to society or to both, and that is part of our responsibility as a post-secondary institution. So my view is that philosophy, for lack of a better word, is still extant. We do, from an administrative perspective, look at the costs of programs. We do look at those things, and the province is obviously interested in the viability and sustainability of universities as institutions. But it does not necessarily mean that every program will be on the left side or the right side of the ledger based on whether or not it as an individual program brings net revenue into the university. John, do you want to respond?
Yes, I mean, I can only respond in terms of what we know at the moment and what we do at the moment, but I think it's important to emphasize that every year my office actually consults with every program and every academic unit about the enrollment targets for that year. And clearly a consideration is precisely what you've raised, which is the quality of the program. The other thing I would say, I mean, you mentioned the issue, I think, basically of graduate student funding of, if you're going to go out and take part in some of the experiential learning opportunities that we have at the graduate level, and we're very rich with that. I mean, the only comment I can make is that the percentage of graduate students who are funded at Carleton University has gone up quite significantly since about 2006-07, as has the level of funding. So I think at the moment we administer something in the region of $40 to $45 million of funding for 2,500 full-time students. So, and the other thing to realize is that the government has committed itself to 6,000 additional graduate student spaces that are funded from the government by grant money. So clearly a top priority for my faculty going forward into the next year is to make sure that we make the strongest possible and the most convincing bid possible for those places, because then that will result in very significant additional funding coming into the university, which can then perhaps support further innovative programs.
Thank you very much. We've reached the end of our time, but I want to thank all of you who have remained for coming, and to everyone for coming, indeed. I just want to indicate that there will be other opportunities to interact with the working group. We've asked each faculty dean to host a special faculty meeting open to faculty, staff, and students. And we will be coming and talking to you at those. There will also be 2 other general calls, if you like, for people to come and engage with the working group. We hope to have all of these sessions completed by Reading Week. So stay tuned and keep your eye on Today at Carleton and for other announcements. And there are other resource materials related to the work of the working group up on the site right now, so you can access those. And finally, please feel free to contact us. Mandate Working Group at carleton.ca is the email, and we'll be happy to receive and reflect on your comments. So thank you very much for coming on behalf of my colleagues, and I hope you found it worthwhile.